Jacksonville, the child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. Poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history, this land of flowers.
The week that was from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. We are on the 26th of July, 2019. Boston Radio coming to you from the Jerry Pippin Memorial Broadcast Booth. You can find us on the Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Spreaker, and many, many more, including something called Cash. We move around. I suppose one would say where Internet radio is. We are there in other popular areas. We're working on a broadcast called Podcast, and more podcasts. Evidently, they are out there, and various media depositories are picking them up. What is happening here? There is an evolution back to more internet radio. As we see iHeartRadio, it is a radio station. They have radio stations, the largest in the U.S., and now they're in what is termed the podcast business. So you have all of these various operators out there, aggregators like Speaker. They're there, and all of these others where you can upload your broadcast. And of course on YouTube you can have both audio and visual presentations. We'll have a visual presentation going to a little studio next week and make one for YouTube. We've been wanting to do this for some time, so we'll get around to it. It does take a few minutes. We've been amazed at listening to programs. We listened to the BBC where they reviewed the week, and a very interesting week indeed. And in this report, we'll have the latest climatical happenings from Alaska, the Anchorage newspaper there, and what is happening in Alaska, 33-degree Celsius readings, and we'll go over the historic record. They've been keeping records for about 100 years. So we'll look at that, and the earthquake in Los Angeles. It was a 7.1 on the Richter scale. We'll visit Charlie Cook, the premier handicapper. He's talking about the state of the race, and if we have time, a little bit of George Will talking about a stupid candidate. He's talking about the old axiom of insurance when we talk about Medicare for all. Very interesting concept, and the so-called concept of private insurance. We'll talk a little bit about that. We won't have the numbers there, and much of the numbers that are presented by the George Wills of the world are just that, presented. They're not back up. He would list, I believe, at about 221 million people. There are 300 million plus in the U.S. Now, and that have some kind of quote-unquote private insurance from their employer. One of the very interesting situations there, as we look forward the next 5-10 years, there will be quote-unquote fewer employers offering what he is talking about. So there is a transitional period coming up, particularly when you look at the so-called gig economy out there. A number of people that work part-time, that work for the Ubers, the Lyfts, and various other people. We used to call those freelancers. Well, that all plays in there. And also the corporate insurance types and their management systems, the rumblings from Berkshire Hathaway and Amazon and wanting to create very large pools. These are some types of managed pools. So this will have a lot to do with what is going on. We don't have any new polls today, but and also the G20 went and G20 disappeared. That was at the end of the week. DJ Trump walked across the militarized zone and met with Chairman There are more ramblings there. They'll get down to actually some negotiations. As we said on one of the other broadcasts, when you start looking at the disarmament negotiations between the U.S. Democratic Republic of Korea, you are having a situation where things are not dramatic. In other words, you won't see a total disarmament. You will see a very thought out, I don't know, well thought out evolutionary process, because we're not only looking at the nuclear weapon stockpiles, but missiles and various types of missiles, and there are people that know how to do a proper negotiation. And if the Trump administration between now 2020 can come up with some sort of gradual program where some progress is being made, he could come up with a Nobel Peace Prize. They give those things out not like they used to. You can kind of stumble into them. Many people have stumbled into those, so to speak, part of the historic record there. We won't get into that. We have a 4th of July special. Invite you to listen to that. We incorporated actually a Memorial Day presentation from the late, great Jerry Pippin that he recorded in 2011. We want people to listen to that. It's very relevant for today and where we are in 2019, particularly what happened on the 4th debacle in Washington. DJ Trump in the rain with a teleprompter talking about airports in the 1700s. There were no airplanes in the 1700s. Thus, we have that situation. We also have the census question disappearing about who is citizens and who is not. That question was put on hold by the Supreme Court. Trump is throwing out a little red meat to his supporters, saying that we could revive it in executive orders. Well, executive orders do not trump Supreme Court decisions. And at the federal court, one district court in Maryland, they are still doing more discovery. The Department of Justice has not come up with even a plausible excuse to offer this particular situation of this question on are you a citizen or not. It's already had a drastic impact on who is a citizen, who is not a citizen, and how that whole dynamic is playing out. Very, very important situation there. And so stay tuned. But the forms are being printed now, and they will be out, and it is a big deal. There is a debate coming up, I believe it's in Houston, Texas, by the National Education Association. Many of the candidates will be there. Let's just go to see precisely where we are and precisely where we are not. And so that we attempt to do. We'll start, I guess, with Charlie Cook and let's see, what is his, the primary election debates like a Roshan Tess, I hope I'm pronouncing it, Swiss psychologist. People can watch and hear the same things and reach very different conclusions. They can see different winners too, as the deadline for this column after the Wednesday debate before Thursday. I heard or read commentary asserting that almost every candidate on the stage even Bill de Blasio, whose performance I thought matched up well with 4/10 of a point, he averaged in the national polls, got praised by one Washington-based political supporter. I expect that the same will happen again in the Thursday debate as well. Republicans will probably think the debates resemble the bar scene from Star Wars, a feeling that quite a few liberal and Democrats felt. Different strokes for different folks. Debates are often overrated as factors in election outcomes, but in a very smart column in the Hill earlier this week, a poster named Mark Millman argued that primary debates are far more impactful than those in general elections. That's an interesting theory in itself. Millman pointed to a University of Missouri study showing that terms of change in voters, primary debates have 10 times more impact than general election debates. So when partial allegiances anchor so many political decisions, there are few people to move in response to general elections. Millman explained, in primaries, however, there are no partisan guideposts. With debates, it's important to remember there aren't like high school or college debates where winners and losers are decided. The criteria are much different. Each debate is over. Viewers can consider several questions. Who surprised you? Are there 2 or 3 candidates who knew little about any interests or impressions, or you want to learn more about it and open to possibly supporting them? While debates aren't likely to reshuffle the whole deck, Elizabeth Warren, whose campaign seemed to generate some real momentum going on, performance, cementing her as a top-tier candidate. A couple other candidates have been hardly registering a pulse, but it should take relatively serious, noting those Senator Booker of New Jersey and former Secretary Julian Castro of Texas. Going to the debates, the real clear average of polls had Booker at 2.3, which doesn't really matter. Senator Klobuchar seemed to do pretty well and will likely improve her current average of 9/10 of a point. Well, she's actually above that. It would be surprise if Beto O'Rourke picked up any support, though I guess he has more supporters. Just going by the poll averages, the total is 88%, so with 12%, that could be seen as up for grabs. Beyond the 12, it's a zero-sum game for anyone to gain. Someone else has to lose support. With so long before the first votes are cast, one thing to watch is questions and posters at the Public Opinion Strategies and Hard Research have asked the NBC Wall Street Journal poll this year. A Republican poster, Bill Intafe, and his counterpart, Fred Yang. The only answer to me is really problematic in the general elections when the anchor here, Lester Holt, asked Wednesday night for candidates for show of hands on private health care coverage. Obviously, healthcare coverage is a complicated issue with people deeply conflicted. But when we learn about the fights over Hillary Care, that was in the 90s, doesn't really apply here. Obamacare in 2009, 2010, is that about half of the American people getting their insurance through their employer, private policies, about 70% of them satisfied. This is a real nervousness about giving up what they have, and if Warren does well, this is something that will be worth watching. Very, very interesting when you talk about private insurance and where private insurance is going. That is a question we'll be looking at as the polls register. So let's move on here. Where do we go next? Well, we'll get a little bit of George Will here. This is the same thing. If Kamala Harris is elected president in 2020, re-elected in 2024 by the time she leaves office, 114 months from now, she might have a coherent answer to questions of whether Americans should be forbidden to have so-called private health coverage. Well, these various programs that I've seen, none of them have actually forbid Americans to have private insurance. They can have supplemental insurance and various other kinds of insurance there, and no doubt policies would be available. What he's talking about is her 22 weeks of contradictory statements here. Well, 18% of the American economy. That is the same old argument that was argued before about the percentage of the economy before Obamacare and what would happen after it. It has expanded and is much more robust today than it ever has been. That is a known situation there. The big question here, will the propaganda of the past in the 90s, when we had Hillary Care, we had some fictional characters called Harry and Louise that put out various kinds of fear tactics. But things have changed since then. We did not have the copays that insurance companies have today, and there was not the type of upfront costs. In those days, these so-called private plans covered most things. There were not the deductibles. There was a totally different system, and we did not have the managed care programs that you have today. So, in other words, we are talking about a different ballgame where George Will has got some problems here bringing this up. How will this particular approach come out? One does not know. The only thing we do know is that the debates from Florida, Miami, when a moderator asks how many people watching at home have health care through their employer. Well, that is a very hard situation to come about because many of the major corporations have so-called managed care. Now they're specialized enterprises that manage prescription costs and many other things. So it's a much more complicated debate. So in other words, things have to be framed now in such a way that we understand what is going on. Now, one cannot, on Ring a Bell, Harris can erase the fact, well, it'll be forgotten. And this is just something that he's writing. 80 million, 217 million, 80 million more than voted in 2016. Well, people are not necessarily going out to vote to save insurance policies that they have no idea what's going on. Nothing did more to fuel the so-called conservative ascendancy in the 80s and the 70s enthusiasm of some judges in politics for compulsory busing children away from their homes. Well, this was something that came out after the apartheid situation. Busing was just a remedy because of where people were. Very explosive era there, and you can have that happening. But times are changing, period. And people will change, and things will continue to change. I think the big question here is where is George Will and the type of propaganda that George Will is running. Let's go to the hurricane in the earthquake in California. Now, it's about 10 miles from Los Angeles. Series. It was a 7.1 magnitude quake struck out in 125 miles north of Los Angeles, where it was something called Ridgecrest. That was the epicenter. It was about 10 miles actually northeast of Ridgecrest. Ridgecrest, a city of 28,000, not very many people, and state of emergency was called. That was after the 6.4. That's on the Richter scale, and then of course later on Friday was a 7.1. So you'll have a series of earthquakes for those that live in California areas where they are. Remember the Northgate one, that was a 6.7 magnitude there. That was in 1994, and 57 people were killed, caused billions of dollars of damage, and there hasn't been any damage in Kern County where Ridgecrest is and Kernville are located. So not so far. That could come later in the ball game. Very little damage there. I've not been to those counties. One can figure that they are partially served counties. We'll go to Alaska now. This is the Anchorage Daily. A nice picture that we'll probably have on our marquee of a gentleman and his family going fishing. An unusual heat wave, of course, is racked up. This is in south central Alaska, up to 25 degrees above the average. The average there is about 65 degrees, and it spiked to about 33 degrees Celsius, and that is 90 degrees, shattering an all-time high of 85 that was set 50 years ago. And elsewhere in the region, the all-time high was 88 degrees, and there was 89 degree at Kenai, and that was broke in 1953. King salmon, was 89 degrees and beat a record set in 1953 by 1 degree. The average temperature there is 95 degrees, although still about 10 degrees warmer, bringing temperatures in Anchorage back down into the 70s and low 80s by Friday. And these are some temperatures here. This is in Anchorage in June of 14th of 1969. It was 85 degrees. In July of 2003, it was 84 degrees, and June 26th of 1953, it was 83 degrees. Didn't know that. Went out to visit Alaska in the early 60s, returned in the 70s to do a class on the sociology of death. Anyway, I was in Fairbanks. We did go to Anchorage. That was during the hurricane. Had a relative that lived there. Anyway, in 2015, that's June, it was 83 degrees. And June 16th, it was 83. So there have been quite a few 83s. And June 16th of 2016, that was 15 and 2 and 15 there. High pressure systems are unusual, but according to Rick Foreman, a climatologist at the Alaska Center For climate assessment policy, there is no one answer why this one has brought such high temperatures. A perfect storm of climate conditions set the stage for incoming high-pressure systems to toast south central Alaska. Very interesting here. I put this up on Facebook at local factors at play. Sea breeze at the Ted Stevens, you remember he was a senator from Alaska, late senator, International Airport, where the National Weather Service is officially a temperature measurement that's for Anchorage. And of course, you have a sea breeze coming in also. Large scale, what's called the background weather is this is a little bit better each year and putting high pressure systems out there. So stay tuned for what is happening out in Alaska. Very, very interesting situation. Now, we've done Charlie Cook. There was also a big standoff between left-wing, progressive people. There was a rally in downtown D.C., Freedom Plaza, on a Saturday. Anti-fascist people there were there, and somebody called the Proud Boys, a proclaimed Western chauvinist fraternal organization, were there demonstrating. Police kept the two apart. Of course, the police were partial to the Proud Boys. A confrontation at Freedom Plaza occurred there. Gavin McGinnis, founder of the Proud Boys, took the stage, followed by right-wing journalist Laura Loomer and Milo Yiannopoulos. I hope I pronounced his name right. Anyway, he was escorted out of there shortly after 1:30. Yiannopoulos was escorted out the back of the rally by several Proud Boys. Police officers opened a barricade for him, and away he went. A short-lived celebrity, about all we can say there. Tomorrow, the U.S. will play the Netherlands in the Women's World Cup. That'll be the premier game there. We feel, and of course, again, they're outmanned. The Netherlands, we look to them because they are there and have never won the big show, as one would say. So we wish them well. The All-Star game is coming up this week also. And we'll have more reports on it. Not today, unfortunately. We'll see you on the Monday morning quarterback on a Monday morning. And also, we'll be back with a Numbers Man report coming out. I believe it'll come out on Monday, so we'll see it. We look forward to that production. And as we move forward here, we'll have an open source report. There is one I want to get. This is McAfee was an antivirus maker, and we almost missed him. Where is he? This is from the Reuters press here. Anyway, he's back on the run again, John McAfee, tech guru, puffing a cigar. He's now off of Havana Harbor. A picture of him. He's the creator of an antivirus software. That was in 1998. Remember seeing a picture of him. He provided antivirus at the time, protection to the White House. And that was when George H.W. Bush was in the White House. He's even talking about running a libertarian nomination for president. He's 73 years old, and he's in cryptography now, cryptocurrency. It would be trivial to get around the U.S. embargo, though the use of a clever system of currency. So I made a formal offer to the Cubans. Cuba's interested in this. Well, Cuba was not responded. It's a government there, a cryptocurrency, and he's one of people could do it, no doubt about that. You can't just create a coin and expect it to fly. You have to base it on a proper blockchain. and have a structure such that meets a specific need of a country or an economic situation. That is from Mr. McAfee there. And he just basically said he didn't pay taxes for 8 years. That's why the feds are looking for him. He was in the Bahamas, but he's got the word that perhaps they would get him. Anyway, he is a crypto security expert, says he hopes to extend his visitor visa indefinitely, breaking a U.S. ban on recreational vehicles visiting the island imposed last month, and plans to use social media where he has 1 million followers. We do follow him on Twitter, and he believes Cuba would not expedite him, and no doubt they would not. They can use his expertise, and so they have no comment on what Mr. McAfee is doing. But he does say that he is one of few people. I think he listed here at about 10 people in the world that actually know the ins and outs of cryptocurrency. I would not doubt this because he's been in the antivirus business for a very, very long time. Iran is looking at cryptocurrency, so is Venezuela. They're looking at backing it up by their gold. And people that do antivirus, anti-intrusion software, he would know a blockchain. There's no doubt about that. Just looking around with it and how it can be done. And he is saying here there are probably less than 10 people in the world who know how to do that, and I'm certainly one of them. There's no doubt about that. His expertise can be used. That is what we call a knowledge work, and knowledge work in itself is a very valuable commodity and will become much more valuable commodity as we move along. Nonetheless, have a good weekend, everyone out there. Enjoy the All-Star Game. Enjoy the Women's World Cup. And just enjoy yourself, period, as we are now in summertime. Good day.